Welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
And the Golden Eagles of Marquette University in Milwaukee are bound for the Final Four for only the third time ever.
5 seconds left. Marquette down by one, trying to avoid the upset. Blue the drive, the left hand. It's good. 1 second to play. Vander Blue has put Marquette in front by one.
And I want to win every day as basketball players, as students, and I want to win every day, most importantly, as people.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Chili Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lavender. A very Merry Christmas from all of us here at the pod to you and yours, to all of our friends who celebrate a different holiday or who don't celebrate at all. We're so glad you could be with us because finally, it is the start of the Big East Conference basketball season. Marquette will face off against the Xavier University Musketeers at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 Central on Wednesday, December 27th. Now, we've said multiple times, while Marquette had a solid performance in their non-conference portion of their schedule, it wasn't enough to get them into the tournament alone. They need to perform throughout the conference season and rack up wins where they can against quality opponents. And that starts with the Xavier University Musketeers. Now, normally we do a preview pod amongst us, but today we've got a special treat for you. Recently, our very own Pete Mohan interviewed Shannon Russell, who covers the Xavier University men's basketball team for WCPO in Cincinnati. She's got a verified Twitter account and is an excellent Twitter user, so be sure to check her out at SL Russell. But from here on out, it's going to be Pete interviewing Shannon and talking about the Xavier matchup and what Marquette fans can expect from Xavier and what she thinks the outcome of the game may be. Again, thanks for tuning in to the Real Chili Podcast. Enjoy the Xavier preview.
I have the privilege of hosting the Xavier beat writer, Shannon Russell from WCPO in Cincinnati. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so Big East season's right around the corner. I know you guys got a tough upcoming matchup with Northern Iowa coming up. And then right around the corner, we got the big Big East opener matchup Wednesday, December 27th at the Bradley Center in Milwaukee. So Marquette starts at home, but with a tough matchup and a Xavier team that has had a non-conference performance thus far. How do you see Xavier's performance early in the season?
Oh, I think Xavier has gotten off to a great start in the non-conference. I think that they, as always, ever since they were in the Atlantic 10, they've really worked to beef up their non-conference schedule to put themselves in the best position for a NCAA tournament bid, and this year is no different. You know, they did lose to Arizona State on a neutral court, but they were able to beat Wisconsin on Wisconsin's court. They've been able to hold serve at home, and then I think that the final piece of the puzzle would be ideally getting a win at Northern Iowa, but that's easier said than done.
How'd that Northern Iowa, just curious, how'd that matchup come about? Is that a home and home that you guys arranged with them?
Well, what happened was, it's kind of a long story. So last year, the exempt event that Xavier played, they played Northern Iowa twice through the events because that was just a kind of a perk of the event. They hosted Northern Iowa, but they also played them on a neutral court. And that was also because Xavier thought it was going to get into the Gavitt games, but it didn't get a Gavitt games matchup. So
bonus road game there.
Yeah. Oddly enough, it played Northern Iowa twice last season, and then this is the back end of the home and home. So this is a return trip for Xavier to Cedar Falls. You know, it's going to be, like I said, a pretty tough matchup.
Yeah, one more legit test for you guys heading into the Big East. Now, I saw coming across the feed that you guys have had some injuries lately. We haven't gotten into the full roster, but what's going on with those injuries right now?
J.P. Mikura and Kaiser Gates were injured in the previous game against East Tennessee State. J.P. did not play last night against Marshall because of blurry vision, and Kaiser didn't play because of dizziness. And during the game, Najee Marshall, a freshman who's been playing really well, he fell hard and hurt his back, and so he did not play the second half.
That's not good.
On top of that, Tyreek Jones was in and out of the game with a left foot injury. So Xavier's been pretty beat up lately, but I would assume or expect that JP Mikura and Kaiser Gates would play as soon as Friday, and I'm not sure about Najee Marshall's injury and the extent of that, but he might be available too. So, yeah, they're just a little bit not quite to full strength at this point.
Yeah, Marquette, dealing with their own injury worries. Andrew Rousey's calf got stomped on, but the good sign was that he was back on the bench near the end of that Northern Illinois game. Certainly signs are pointing to him being able to be ready for the Xavier game, which is huge for Marquette because even just the half that he was out against Northern Illinois, the ball handling suffered a severe decline in my opinion. And I don't want to bring up a sore subject, but for those of us out there that are Marquette fans, maybe we remember the fact that we got 2 huge wins against Xavier last year. How do you see this matchup differing from last year's, and what changes, in your opinion, have you seen to the roster in a way that would alter that outcome that we saw?
Well, I got to say the 2 losses to Marquette for Xavier fell within a 6-game losing streak, which was unheard of in Chris Mack's tenure. And the second loss was at home to Marquette on Senior Day. So don't think that Xavier has not forgotten that. That will be, for them, I'm sure, great motivation in starting against Marquette in the Big East slate. What's different for Xavier this year? Not a whole lot. I mean, in terms of their core players, most of them are back. Trayvon Blewett, JP Mikura, Sean O'Mara, the seniors that have anchored the court. You'll see Karam Cantor. He is new. He's a grad transfer. He's really added a lot to the offense since he's come along. And then, Tyreek Jones has gotten better. The freshmen that are now sophomores have really improved. And there are some new pieces to the puzzle, some freshmen that are getting minutes, Najee Marshall, Paul Scruggs, to a lesser extent, Elias Harden. So Xavier's offense has been really good. Its defense is still work in progress. I think that it's going to be a great game. Marcus Howard and Andrew Rousey were pretty devastating to Xavier last year in both meetings. So I see those matchups again being kind of like the focal points of the games this year.
Yeah, Marcus went off in that first game to the tune of 9 out of 12 3-pointers. And
it was insane. It was crazy.
Yeah, I think Marquette fans might remember the 3-point party call by Jim McIlvain, who's our color commentator. He kind of went crazy. I happened to be listening to the game and not watching it. He's going, 3-point party! And we're like, all right, this guy's a little over the top. But it was an amazing performance, and he's just continued that type of play this year. The first game, it was a bigger blowout, and the key, I think, for Marquette, looking at the box score in retrospect, was defending the 3-point line, and Marquette out-rebounded Xavier 41-34. So, and those are issues that Marquette has struggled with this year at times. Rebounding certainly is one thing, and just with their more diminutive backcourt, guarding the 3-point line is difficult. Do you see Xavier as being able to take advantage of the 3-point shot in this game and Marquette's lack of height in the backcourt?
I mean, yeah, both those things could help Xavier. It just, it depends on how Xavier's shooting. They came out in the East Tennessee game and were just cold. They just couldn't make anything. Most of every other game they've shot well, as evidenced by their 50% field goal percentage. But, I think that the front court really had a chance to shine against Marshall, and they scored more than 40 points, got more than 20 rebounds combined. I think those will be kind of other key subplots in the game against Marquette. It's just really hard to say. So much goes with like the tempo and the flow and turnovers and who's taking care of the ball better. And then, whose shooters are most effective, front court or back court.
I noticed from checking out KenPom across this year and last year that Xavier's playing more up-tempo this year. Is that a product of maybe a better defense getting out and running, or is that a directive from Chris Mack?
They always like to get out and run. That's always Xavier. So they've just been able to do it more efficiently, I guess. Yeah. That's the always number one game plan, is they like to get up and down quickly, and they're not necessarily taking their time. Of course, they certainly can reset in the half court, and they've got tons of plays to get different guys open, but they really want to grab that rebound and go.
Speaking of the up-tempo, both games last year were pretty high scoring. Both teams have top 15 offenses in the country, according to KenPom. So, I mean, it has the makings of a shootout. And, You ask any Marquette fan, and they'll probably tell you that we're not going to be counting on our defense to win this one, but we just need it to show up, and that'll help. Your one loss in the non-conference so far is to Arizona State, who has two similar guards to Marquette. They combined for 62 points against you guys and went 12 out of 20 from three. What do you think that you guys are going to learn from that, and do you think that this was a growing experience and you're glad you saw them early on so that you're more prepared to face Marquette right off the bat?
Well, yeah, I think Arizona State was one of those teams that's really kind of proven itself. Maybe we started the season under the radar, but has some really, really talented pieces. And I think that some of Xavier's players didn't have their best game. I mean, gosh, they were not shooting very well from three-point range. I'm looking at their 13 turnovers, which isn't the worst, but they just didn't have the defense to keep Arizona State in check. So I think, yeah, that's definitely, when Trey Holder is going 5 for 8 from three and making 14 field goals overall, to have a guy that scores 40 points is going to give any team a wake-up call. So I think for Xavier, that the kind of team that Arizona State is the kind of caliber of team it's going to face in the Big East. So I think for sure it made Xavier better and made it kind of check its defense and know that like anything less than what its best is could give it trouble, could be a liability.
And your guys' wins, what do you think has been the difference maker in those games?
Well, I'd say Trayvon Blewett and JP McCura, when they tend to score between 35 and 40 points combined a game, that's a great sign for Xavier. But being able to shoot efficiently and rebound well, and then you factor in the defense and the way that Xavier's always prided itself on on the defensive end, and it's not played the best defense that it can at this point. So again, that's a work in progress, but that's something that I would expect to become tighter and tighter as the season goes on. The team is playing 1-3-1 zone. They did a lot last night. However, that is also probably effective having a short bench and limited people available. But they have played 1-3-1 in past years and have sprinkled it in a little bit this year too. So they have a lot of different ways to try to contest shots. Their big emphasis is to not let another team get a second shot. It's just sticking to those principles and doing it against better teams is going to be kind of the key for Xavier.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are one of the best rebounding teams in the country, and I think that's what scares me the most about Xavier is you guys are deep in the front line. You mentioned most of the guys. Karam Cantor, he just basically had his biggest game in you guys' last game against Marshall. O'Mara's killed us in the past. Kaiser Gates is a great player who can actually, that'll be an interesting matchup because he can hit the three, right?
Yes.
One thing that I want to get into is the changing dynamic of Marquette's roster. Early in the season, we struggled in that we just didn't have enough fouls to throw at their big men. So now with Harry Froling joining the roster, it's going to be really interesting for me to see if he's forced into action in this game because of foul issues to Helt and Theo John, who at times have had trouble staying on the floor. I notice you guys really rely strongly on getting to the line and scoring points that way. Do you think that that's going to be one of the targets for Chris Mack and his game plan to go at those big men and draw fouls?
I think it is for pretty much any game to try and neutralize the other team's front court. But, Xavier, I talked a little bit about Tyreek Jones. He wasn't able to play a ton last year, although his talent wasn't the question. He would foul way too much, and he would be able to, or wouldn't be able to play long stretches of time because he would foul. This year, it's a lot different. He's got more maturity, more poise. He's a beast inside.
Yep.
He is an explosive player, and I think that's going to be a big difference. Sean O'Mara is a senior, and he's been there before. He knows these teams, and like you said, he's been a problem for Marquette in the past. So, I think you add kind of all the parts. Xavier's front court is a lot more consistent than it was last year. And that's obviously a strength of the teams. But yeah, they're going to try and battle inside and get those boards and second chance points. And of course, the silver lining would be is Marquette or the opposition if their bigs were in foul trouble, and that would open the door for Xavier.
Now, we haven't really talked about Kira and Blewett much yet. I mean, there's not much to say other than they're great wing playmakers in the Big East and both candidates for first team All Big East, in my opinion. They're going to give teams trouble on any night. I noticed that Blewett's maybe had a little trouble shooting the ball lately. Have you noticed some of that, or is he just
he's a little banged up
you know?
right now. He's like other guys on the team. He's kind of coming back from an ailment, but last night when he played Marshall, he scored 10 points and none in the second half, and that tied his season low. So it wasn't his best game. Hope that he's feeling better once Big East play rolls around, because he's clearly a tremendous athlete and player. So he's averaging 20.4 points per game and a little more than 5 rebounds. He's the guy that Xavier wants with the ball in his hands with the game on the line.
You briefly mentioned Najee Marshall, and we talked about his back injury, but this guy's a 6'7", 218-pound freshman, and he's had an impact right away for you guys. 8 points and 3.5 rebounds in 18 minutes a game, which is impressive for any freshman. Clearly, he's going to be a thorn in our side for 4 years. What do you see out of him?
He's just a fun player to watch. He's a guy that a lot of national media said he was, someone that was maybe also under the radar that had a lot of potential. And he's quick, he's athletic, he's able to just really get out in transition and make good plays. He's a freshman, so mistakes come with the territory. I think all the freshmen are trying to minimize turnovers at this point and make sure they're kind of flowing in the offense. But I think that's an adjustment for any freshman going to college ball. But Najee, he's been a real impact player. He's been a guy that's come off the bench for the most part and able to really, he can shoot threes. He doesn't take many of those shots, but he can rebound. He's just kind of a complete player. But his quickness and his just skill is just kind of, like I said, it's just kind of a show to behold when he's got the ball in the open court.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting matchup off the bench between Marshall and Jamal Cain, who's a freshman as well, probably about the same size. He's started to come on a bit lately, and really, all of Marquette's freshmen, they've basically been the defensive reinforcements that we've needed. Running out of time a little bit here, but I wanted to bring up Quentin Gooden, you guys' point guard. He's a 6'4" sophomore. Really, he's been an elite distributor, averaging 6 assists a game. Maybe you can enlighten us about his defense a little bit and whether you think he can contain Rousey or Howard. What does he bring to the table for this team?
Well, Quentin, he's, first of all, a great kid, but last year when Edmund Sumner had his season-ending knee injury against St. John's, Quentin had to come in as a freshman and take over the team as point guard. He filled in admirably, helped the team to the Elite Eight. In the meantime, he didn't really, share this until much later after the season, but he had his own injury he was dealing with. He had a foot injury. So to be able to play so well despite that injury just says a lot about Quentin. And then he spent, the summer trying to get better, working out, working on his body, working on his game. And he's really been, I think, underappreciated thus far because he's been the propellant for this team. Yeah, turnovers kind of come with the territory with a point guard, but
Sure.
He's done a great job of distributing the ball. And he was the one against Marshall that when Xavier went through a tough stretch in the second half and wasn't scoring, he got them back on the board with a couple of layups and is able to convert free throws too. So he's done really well. I think that it's probably the best situation Xavier could have asked for, especially last year with Edmund Sumner being hurt when he was.
Yeah, I think he's one of the guys that's going to put pressure on Marquette's defense at the rim. Free throws have been a really important part of you guys' success so far this season. So I'm interested to see how well he plays in this game.
Yeah, I am too. I think his defense has been good so far. So he's been playing well. I'll be interested to see how it kind of goes against when Xavier starts playing the Big East competition that it's going to face. It's a little different story.
So we talked a little bit about some of the matchups. Talking about rebounding. What do you see as standing out as being a key matchup within this game?
I guess we would speak in generalities at this point, and that would just be the team that defends and rebounds in this game is going to win because I think both teams have people that can score. So whoever locks down the most and makes it tough for the other team to make shots, kind of maybe gets in their head, is going to be the one that will prevail in these this matchup and the next one too.
Yeah, Marquette struggled to get things going early on at times. Had a few tight games with teams that they're definitely better than. And in the last game against Northern Illinois, I don't know if their rhythm was somewhat disrupted by the fact that they were trying to integrate Froling into the lineup, even though he didn't play much. It just seemed like the guys weren't on the same page. I'm interested to see if Froling gets any minutes in this game, but I think that Marquette's big men, they're just not in the same class as Xavier's, and with the skill and the depth of your front court, I see that giving Marquette trouble. I went on the record in our Big East preview just a little bit ago saying that I thought Xavier was going to come out victorious in this game. Do you have a prediction for this game, or is that against your journalistic rules there?
No, I think that it's always hard to win on an opponent's court. It's going to be, hostile fans, that, it's in a game that means a lot. So Xavier, based on paper, on what we know about both teams, I see Xavier prevailing in that game. However, I don't know such variables as who will be playing due to injury. I don't know, who's going to have a good day and who's not. I would say, on paper, I think it'll be a close game. I think Xavier will come out on top, and unless Marquette finds a way to be able to defend the front court, and in addition to Trayvon Blewett and JP McGurra.
Right. Yeah, one thing that worrying for me is the fact that this is 2 days after Christmas, dead in the middle of Christmas break. I'm sure we'll get some people driving up from Chicago for the game since it is so big, but our crowds have been lacking, in my opinion, lately, and in Wojo's opinion as well. And the way that Marquette has lacked energy at the beginning of games, I think is basically going to tell the story, the first 5 to 10 minutes of Marquette, whether they play with energy and whether the crowd is energized. I think that'll set the tone. Any last words, Shannon, before we go? Off the record, what are you looking forward to in this?
Well, I just think it's going to be a great game. Xavier could be, they're 9 in the country right now in the AP poll. Should they win at Northern Iowa on Friday, then they obviously have a chance to move up a notch or two. So, they came out on yesterday and had a 15-0 run on Marshall and really kind of set the tone there. Things fell apart a little bit later, but anyway, I think it'll be a fun game. I think that there, as we talked about at the beginning, Xavier remembers the 2 losses last year and probably has some unfinished business with Marquette, and it's the start of Big East play. It should be exciting.
Again, thank you so much for joining us. Our fans, thank you, and hopefully some Xavier fans get to listen to this too and learn something about Marquette. Should be a great game. So thanks again, Shannon. Shannon Russell from WCPO. Yeah, thanks.